Welcome to Dynamos Dozen, the podcast that we bring you each and every single week. We're talking about whatever may be on my mind, from pro wrestling, sports, entertainment, music, movies, muesli, fresh socks and jocks, and everything in between. Never forgetting the talk. Welcome back to another great show with me, your host, Ian the Dynamo Kelly. I am back. And of course, your new co-host slash host, depending on what way you want to look at it, the shopkeeper, Niall Hogan himself. Niall, great to see you filling in for me there the other day and, making a bit of an attempt at the intro. I appreciate that. That was nice.
Yeah,
It was nice to see.
I need to brush up on it a little bit, but we'll get there eventually. It's quite a unique intro, let's say.
It's when you're a bit of a nut job, you come up with these things,
I think when you're about 100 episodes in, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we've a pretty good and very, very different show today. In fact, probably the first time in Dynamo's Dozens history, and certainly in the Dynamo Podcast Network history, that we're going to talk about a bit of a murder mystery. But before we get into that, we do have to take care of some business because business comes first. I am sorry. We are the Dynamo Podcast Network, and you are listening to us right now on YouTube. If you can see our faces, that is where you're watching. So please just drop below, hit that bell notification button, hit the subscribe button. Please like and comment on all of our shows. We have absolutely almost thousands at this stage of shows in all different genres, whether it be horror movies, whether it be football, whether it be hockey, whether it be pro wrestling, whether it be whatever it may be. We have it and we will cover it. And if you want to get in contact with us, please, just reach out to us in the comments, and we're more than happy to get in touch with you. Of course, we are available on all of your audio choices as well. So we are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, Podbean, Anchor, wherever you listen to your favorite shows, we are there. And then lastly, we are, of course, all of our shows are on Twitter as well. So you'll find all of the Twitter handles wherever you may be. So for Niall, he takes care of the Podman, takes care of the upper tier and all that stuff as well. And I am at Ian Kelly 800. So you can find me with Dynamos Dozen on that as well. But so Niall, we had a bit of a conversation there over the weekend, and we were talking about something that we had watched, and I'm sure a lot of people in Ireland and probably Europe have watched. It is the case of one French lady, Sophie Toscan de Plantier, and I'm happy that I was able to get that. I had to work on that before.
Spot on.
Yeah, I had to work on that one before. But this young French lady obviously was murdered here in Ireland, in West Cork, in 1996, and there has never been any kind of vengeance or justice for her death.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Netflix released a documentary there the other day. I think it's either a 5 or 6-parter looking at it.
Sophie, a murder in West Cork. Yeah, I think it's 4 or 5 parts. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also Jim Sheridan obviously released Murder at the Cottage, which is absolutely outstanding and nothing less than what we would expect from Jim Sheridan.
Shout out to Jim Sheridan. Yeah, one of my favorite filmmakers.
Absolutely, 2 very, very different documentaries insofar as the Netflix was kind of, they had set the agenda and the decision was kind of made.
The narrative was one way, exactly.
Yeah, the narrative was one way. I think with Jim Sheridan, it was more exploratory, and he wasn't going in with any preconceived ideas, say about Ian Bailey, who we will talk about and stuff like that. He was going in with kind of an open book. His goal was really to get to the bottom of what happened, as opposed to confirm what her family thought or what the Irish police thought at the time and stuff like that, which is what I really enjoyed with Jim Sheridan. He was open, and we seen a greater insight in the Jim Sheridan one to Ian Bailey's personal life, and obviously Jules was involved and all that kind of stuff, a hell of a lot more. And again, it just left me intrigued. Like I've heard about this crime obviously for years and years.
Well,
and
that's what I was going to say to you, actually. For anybody out there, say, we have a lot of American listeners, we have a lot of UK listeners, we have a lot of, listeners from all over the world, which is great. And thanks for listening, by the way. But just to give them a little bit of a context, and we won't give you the full breakdown because these documentaries, you really want to go in kind of cold almost, to understand the narrative.
And to form your own opinion.
Exactly. And that's what was, I won't say great about this documentary, because you're talking about someone that was brutally murdered, but at the same time, intriguing would be more the word I think that we would use in this instance. Sophie Toscan de Plantier, she was an artist, a writer, who was married to a big shot, film producer over in France. And I think his best mate was the president of France and everything as well. So much older man and all this, but she was very, very like French people in general. I mean this in a nice way. Very in touch with their artistic side, and they kind of, very rustic. You know what I mean, in their kind of way of dealing, in their way of presenting themselves and presenting their houses and stuff like that. Beautiful nation, you know what I mean. You see the French houses and the way they design stuff. It's amazing. And this girl was very, very, very artistic, and I suppose almost hippie-ish. Would you agree with that, Niall? In that sense, where you go with the flow.
Yeah, it was kind of like kind of an old school way of doing things, really, wasn't it? Like it wouldn't be very modern if you think about it. Like she had this house, this retreat in Tourmore, 6 miles outside school, which is like a kind of a holiday home.
Oh, a beautiful place in Ireland,
but it was kind of a place that she visited to unwind, decompress, have time to herself. They talk in the documentary, there wasn't a lot of furnishings in it. She used it nearly like a meditation yoga kind of place, a place where she could ride and escape.
The lighthouse, that's where she positioned her bedroom. Where I'm not sure the name of the lighthouse now, but it's a beautiful lighthouse, and it basically it just come in her window was
they were saying in her bedroom and all, she used to use the light off the lighthouse to allow her to read at night and all, because all the lights in the house, and the light off the lighthouse used to come in through the window and all. So a beautiful setting for someone who was kind of wrapped up in that kind of business in France to escape and get away. And of course, I've been down to Skull. I'm sure most people in Ireland have visited Skull at some stage or another. It's quite a quiet town, very rural, not a huge amount in it, very quiet, and has been
not a lot of natives in it either. Like it wouldn't be the place where you're going for. I mean, if you're going to see the real Ireland in terms of like the aesthetics of it, landscape and everything. But I mean, it's a proper tourist town. It's like. It'd be like Blackpool in England, or Bray in Ireland, or
But it kind of seems to be a place where, like, if you were recognisable, you could go away there and you could walk the streets and stuff like that. And people aren't going to be intrusive. You can just get on with your business.
100%.
So ideal for someone like herself.
Oh yeah. And the thing about it is, like, we're not going to go through the case or anything here. We're just going to talk more so about the 2 documentaries and kind of give our 2 cents worth on it and what we kind of came out thinking. There's a whole investigation. We don't want to ruin or spoil it for anybody in terms of everybody knows it. It's not a movie, so we're not giving any spoilers here. But basically, the Gardaí, which is the Irish police force on Gardaí Síochána. For anyone outside of Ireland, that's our police force. They were very, very new to something like this in this particular part of town, where they'd never had any murders or anything like that. So that local police force and all that, this was just completely alien to them. And the death itself wasn't just a murder. It wasn't like a hit. I mean, it was an absolute bludgeoning. I mean, the woman was, I think her head was pretty much smashed in with a cinder block. And
I think they reported that they reckoned the head had 40 to 50 blows, so you can just imagine what this crime scene looked like if that's the crime. And we're talking about quite a heavy block and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So
it's a cinder block. I mean, it's a block that they use for walls on people's houses, so it's not we've all lifted them, you know what I mean? We've all done our stint in kind of manual labor and stuff like that, and they're not very easy to lift just at a whim. You know what I mean? You to put a bit of effort into them. So,
and certainly not in that situation.
no, and this lady was obviously murdered at night as well. Now, the thing about it is, without going too much more into the specifics, we're going to get into how these two documentaries plays out. The Garda basically pinpoint one person, which is Ian or Owen Bailey, depending on which you would recognise. So Ian Bailey was an English man from Manchester that came over, I think, in the probably early 90s, maybe. I think
Probably earlier. I think he was here in the 80s as well.
80s, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
saying when he was doing some of his early journalism and stuff like that.
So you knew a little bit about this lad anyway, Noel. So maybe you can take this. Like he was a pretty reputable independent journalist within the UK, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was writing for regular newspapers over there and stuff like that, and producing regular articles. So he was well known in journalist circles. But yeah, it was interesting the way it sort of goes, where they launched a murder inquiry. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
as you said, they hadn't had a lot of experience with this type of thing. And fair to say, there was probably a bit of naivety. And obviously the police would have been under a lot of pressure as well, and a lot of stress, because here we had a murderer potentially out there in the community, in what's quite a small, close-knit community. And I suppose the first thing you think about, obviously your thoughts are with the victim and dealing with that, but you're also thinking, is there going to be someone else? Is this going to be a trail of murders? What's going to happen there? So they have to react really quickly to this in terms of trying to figure out what's going on. Is this a guy that hung around? Is this a guy who's moved on to another town? And is this a guy who's going on a rampage through rural towns, going to commit murders and stuff? So everything is going through these guys' minds, I can imagine, you know what I mean? And the fact that they've had zero experience on it. And it kind of showed as well, because if you look at the coroner or the pathologist or whatever it is, the state pathologist, it took him 28 hours to get there.
Because it was his birthday. Welcome to Ireland, ladies and gentlemen. It was his birthday. And he thought, well, there's not much I can do now. And the horrifying thing about this is that they left the lady lying there pretty much 24 hours while this lad is, finished his little birthday celebration, probably on 300 grand a week, or, a year, should I say.
And I don't know if you looked at some of the footage or some of the photographs that he presented, but it didn't look like a crime scene that was locked down in terms of DNA and everything else. This was a lady found on the ground, practically in a ditch, with a sort of a sheet thrown over her and a bit of crime tape wrapped around it.
Whereas in the broilers,
whereas if that happened today, that whole area would be locked down. In terms of DNA
area,
absolutely.
100%.
No one will be getting in and out. There'll be no one even getting close to it.
No.
So that was kind of a weird one. So when you look at that as well, and then some of the other stuff that comes through, I mean, obviously, you had mentioned to me when we were talking about it over the weekend, they lost a cattle gate.
2 foot cattle gate.
It's a lot more than 2 foot. This cattle gate is the cattle gate into a field.
No, I mean 2 foot upwards. Lengthwise, I mean, you're probably talking 6 foot, right?
Yeah, at least. But they had lost this gate that had blood spatter on it and stuff like that. Now, how you lose a gate, I do not know. But it came down very quickly, where the guards had obviously started doing door-to-door inquiries and all that kind of stuff. And they were interviewing local residents and all that kind of thing. And they seemed to zone in on Ian Bailey very, very quick.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not too sure what drove that decision, in terms of they had kind of nailed their mask to Ian Bailey that this was the guy. Even though
this guy basically was giving other journalists information about how the inside of the house looked and blah blah blah, and this is the first key part of why they're saying Ian Bailey is guilty, because how could he have known this? He was given the impression that he had inside Garda knowledge and all that kind of stuff and blah blah blah, and we never really get to know, I don't think, how he knew that. But look, we all know journalists are generally, a fair few of them, especially from the UK, can be quite sneaky. Do you know what I mean? And find their information and their sources elsewhere, and they kind of keep their sources very private and never throw each other under the bus. But like, this is why they masked Ian Bailey. And then my favorite is that the scratches on his hand and the drawing of the scratches on the hand literally look like it's done by a 3-year-old with a Crayola marker and
See,
or crayon.
there was a number of things that kind of suited the narrative.
Yes.
But then
he was an odd person. What was he, Niall? He was like 6'3". He dressed kind of like in a long kind of black overcoat jacket.
He was quite eccentric.
Yeah, he was very eccentric. He was a poet. He was a writer. And now I have some uncles that, you know, in our town are quite eccentric, and I've heard people call them fucking lunatics and stuff. And they're far from lunatics. They're just very in tune with nature and art and whatever. That's just their thing.
Well,
so this
as he said on the documentary, being eccentric is not a crime.
No, it's not. It's not. And being interested in sex and all that kind of stuff is not a crime. So they kind of go through this lad's diaries, and just because he has odd. I mean, one of the things that they were like, if I could kill someone right now, I would. This is what he had wrote down in his diary. Now, at a completely different time, completely different time. But this is what they're using on this man in court. I dare say, and I challenge anybody out there who's had a bad day and said, if I could get my hands on someone right now, I'd murder them.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Without meaning it. Without meaning it, because we use these phrases in very different contexts all the time.
Absolutely. You know? It doesn't mean you're going to travel 3 miles down the road on foot and grab a concrete block and just throw it on someone's head.
But what I found really interesting was some of the stuff that they came up with, like when they were talking about the cuts on his hands and on his arms and stuff like that. It kind of fitted the narrative, and it brought the viewer down the road that this is the guy. They're just going to eventually get him and figure it out, you know.
Especially in the first documentary, the Sophie, the Netflix
one. Definitely. But what they did was they went back then, and he said that his arms and his hands had been slightly cut and stuff like that because he was cutting down a Christmas tree. So they went and they found where he had cut down the Christmas tree, so it was obviously true. But they tried to redo it in such a way to try and cut the hands and cut the arms, and they couldn't replicate it by cutting down a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
So this what they were trying to do is they were trying to dispel the answers that he was coming up with.
Exactly. And yet they had pictures of the tree being cut down.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if anyone else, has ever been around those sort of trees, but and I'd imagine if you're on the top of a ladder and you're cutting stuff in bare hand, you are going to get little nicks on your hand. It's just inevitable. You know what I mean? But we're not here to defend either or. We're here to kind of...
we're just going through a pathway of what was presented to us.
And I mean, to me, it was like the one part that bothers me the most, and I'm interested to hear people's feedback that have either seen this or will watch it and then come back to us and give us our feedback and tell us we're wrong if you want. But one thing that stood out to me was there was no other suspects. I mean, like, all good. I mean, we've all watched CSI. We've all watched, Law and Order. We've all watched the big kind of American TV shows where, how they finally get to justice. And I got to be honest with you. I am, even though I'm going to sound hypocritical here, I am an innocent till proven guilty fucking abider. So I do believe in the law in that sense. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Even though I know the law is corrupt, I think when it comes to murder or putting someone away for life, that's... it's got to be without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, your T's and your I's have to be dotted and crossed.
Absolutely. I mean, O.J. Simpson, there was more evidence to show this motherfucker was guilty than Ian Bailey here on this one. Do you know, because they had actual proof, they had DNA, they had everything. In this case with Ian Bailey, other than the fact that he was a writer, I had the narrative at the start, watching the Netflix one. I kind of came across this, and it was amazing to kind of watch actually. In the Murder at the Cottage, Jim Sheridan one, that my narrative actually came to fruition, and it was brought up because I had said to you, I said, what if he, he thought he could make a name for himself, kill this lady, and then basically write the case and kind of pin it to the French. that was what I was thinking of, because that's how the Netflix documentary makes you kind of go. Do you know what I mean? It's bringing your brain in that direction and not really giving you any other reason to think otherwise. However, straight away, there's something shady about that French movie producer. Now, I'm probably, if I go missing tomorrow or in the next week and I'm hit, look to France, because obviously I'm speaking out about this now, but I think that motherfucker looks shady. I mean, don't forget, he bought her that house, and the first thing she done was went over and had an affair with some fella in the house.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the rage that you'd have there.
Yeah,
and he knew about it.
Yeah, I think in terms of all that stuff,
but I mean, what I'm saying is, from an investigative point of view, that's the first thing you would do. It's like, this lad was protected by the president of France. He was pushing France just to go, Ian Bailey, he did it. He was pushing to get that done.
Yeah.
And, that kind of stinks to me a little bit, just a little bit, where I'm going, all right, and then a year later, he marries another 20-year-old.
Yeah. But then it was interesting as well when they spoke about Ian Bailey, and they talked about the nick he had on his head. And he explained how the nick came about, that he was killing turkeys for Christmas. And one of them kicked out and caught him on the head and gave him a cut. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I was thinking, okay, he's explained why that cut has happened. Again, no DNA has been found. So if she had have lashed out and she had cut him, there would have been DNA there somewhere. You would assume. But again, there was no DNA. Again, the house was a kind of a weird one as well, because the house was locked from the inside and nothing was disturbed. So it wasn't a break-in. They weren't breaking into this house looking for money or whatever it is, or a robbery or anything like that. Absolutely nothing was disturbed. Everything was on the drainer. Everything was on the table, as you would expect in a normal situation. So it's kind of weird how you try and piece it together as to where it kind of went.
That's exactly it. And look, for us, this is more of a case of like kind of encouraging people to watch it, and kind of see what we'll do, and then maybe have some people on. This would be nice, maybe, to have some people on and see maybe next week what they think of it. We won't spend too much time on it. Like, this is going to be a short episode, as we know, like, and we don't want to kind of ruin the fun, because for me and Niall personally, we really enjoyed watching these shows. You know what I mean? We were talking till 1 o'clock in the morning there on Saturday, and we ended up watching. I was like, wait till 3 in the morning. I was like, shit, I wish I had this conversation the next day. But I suppose, like, in closing it up, Niall, just so that people know about the actual show, and we can kind of give them an idea of where we feel about it. That's maybe what we should spend the next 10 minutes and talking about, is what we think. I'll start by saying I think this shows an absolute corruption within the Gardaí Síochána. I think when you will see that when you watch the Murder at the Cottage version, because you'll see the guards basically saying, oh, we were going, Ian Bailey just lit all of his clothes on fire. The evidence that we were looking for was gone. And one guard said, no, there's an actual statement showing that they took exactly the coat that they were looking for, and they had it in evidence. And that went missing, just along with a big fucking 2-foot gate, 6-foot gate, whatever you want to call it. The other thing was that stood out to me was the fact that, they were going on about this fire and this Marie, what was her name? Marie, oh God.
The woman who had seen him on the bridge.
The woman who had seen him on the bridge, and she was basically now she's the boy that cried wolf syndrome. So you can't believe it, and that comes from her mouth because she's changed her story that much. I got the feeling in the Murder at the Cottage at the end, now that she's talking, I think that's the real her speaking. And it turns out that she said there was pressure on the guards. No, this is the man you saw. He is the murderer. We need your help on this.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like it was like she had sort of said it, and it was being spoon fed back to her.
Yes, we need to close this off.
Yeah, but again, you have to question a little bit of her credibility, because apparently,
she
was supposed to be out having a drink with friends, but she was out with a male colleague. Now, that's all right. You can go out and have a drink with a male colleague, but apparently she hadn't informed her partner. So
that's where the rumors of an affair came from.
So our viewers can draw whatever conclusion they want from that.
That's not for us to
those
say.
are the facts.
Those are the facts. The facts are with Ian Bailey as well, is that they've never been able to find anything on him other than the fact that the Cork Gardaí and Inspector Clouseau, the little nice countryman that you find on the show, who just will defend the guards limitless, even though the guards, they have actual audio evidence of the guards trying to infiltrate Ian Bailey by sending lads down to him with marijuana, with alcohol, to try and get him drunk, to coerce a confession out of him. And the Garda, they did lose a lot of credibility in the late 90s with that, and have done since. But
what was your thinking on the couple of times where he came out and kind of, in a moment, kind of apparently said he had done it? Remember when he gave the kid the lift and stuff like that? He had come out afterwards and he had said, "I didn't quite say it that way. That's what way he took it up."
That's where I'm. Do you remember? You know what? I'm glad you asked me that, because I was the same. I was like, "Why would you say that, you moron?" But then, watching the latest episode, the murder in the cottage one, it was kind of different to the way it was presented at the Netflix one. He was just going around telling everyone.
Yeah, he didn't quite say it that way.
But I was also humor and satire and he quirky and I know I do that. Do you know what I mean? You do that.
Plus, I suppose, if you've had a few drinks and stuff like that, and if they've been banging on to you for 10, 15, 20 years, pinning it on you, I think you might start to convince yourself really that you did it, even if you didn't. You know what I mean? So it's a kind of a weird one. But he did come out afterwards and say, the way that the people worded it in the way that I said it was not the way that I said it.
No, it wasn't the context at all.
So we see a pattern developing here where everything that they try and pin on him, he has a counter argument for it. I suppose, what was your thinking on the alibi in terms of when he originally first said he didn't leave the house that night, and then he said afterwards he did leave the house and go to the studio? Well, that kind of is the one thing that kind of sits with me trying to figure it out.
Well, what would be the difference with me? Right. So so it's on the same property. The studio is literally just down the road. What's the difference if I leave to go to my man cave, which is off my property, and then I lose my alibi because I've left the bed? As soon as you've left the bed, you've lost your alibi.
Yeah, because no one can account for your
actions. So then it's a case of my word against yours. You know what I mean? If I leave to come down here to do some work and do a podcast or whatever it was, he was doing some writing or whatever it was, then my better half cannot account for my actions within that 3-4 8-hour period of speaking. So again, I think it's clutching. It doesn't prove anything. Now, it very well could be the case. It very well could be the case that this man is an absolute sociopath, and just has convinced himself that he hasn't done it, and he's a lunatic.
But this is the only part that really sticks out to me, where he hasn't got anyone to account for his actions in that time period.
But you don't in general. You could get up and go for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Somebody could be found dead in your house tonight, or outside your garden, and your missus could turn around and say, "Well, he got up for a piss for 10 minutes and then he came back."
Oh yeah, 100%. So look, we seen it in the Pistorius case, where the girlfriend or the wife went off to go to the toilet.
There we go.
The toilet gets lit up with an AK-47.
There we go. Do you know what I mean?
I just thought that one was interesting in terms of it was the one thing that kind of, I wouldn't say he didn't have an answer for it, but he didn't have an answer that they could turn around, park that and go, okay. Like when he got the scratch on the head, it was the turkey. When he had the scratched hands on the arms, it was the Christmas tree. So he had answers,
The turkey one I had to laugh at though, because it was like the turkey drop kicked him in the head. Now, look, I'm sure if you do cut a turkey that way, there is a possibility of that happening, depending on how close you are. Yeah. And this is why I didn't really like your man, the inspector. Oh no, there's no way a turkey could do that. No, there's no way a turkey could do that. How do you know? Like, I mean, depending on, you could go into a live wire and it could fucking shock you in the brain, and you know what I mean. It's not all. It's not
That's one of
all.
those things you can't prove whether it would or it wouldn't. It's a
You
moment in
can't.
time.
You can't.
Yeah.
It's a moment. We've all done stupid things where you're going, how did that even happen?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Where you cut your finger or something, that you feel like an idiot.
You feel like an idiot. The amount of times I've taken a bump in wrestling and I've slapped my hand down and my little finger gets a shock through it and the rest of the hand is grand, and I'm like, how did that even happen? Yeah. You know what I mean? It's so ridiculous. But look, I mean, I suppose in closing up, we'll kind of wrap it up now, and just why would you encourage people to watch this first and foremost?
Because there's so much stuff unanswered. It's so open-ended. Like as I said, you know, even when we were talking, I don't know how you can get a murder conviction in a court in France with the same box of evidence that you know, the Irish guards had, and they handed over the files to the French. And the interesting thing was as well that we heard in the Jim Sheridan one was, because he goes heavy into the court case in France, most of the guards involved in the case didn't travel over for the court case in France.
No.
So that to me is very, very strange that a court in France is using a box of evidence from Garda Síochána and none of them came over to discuss what was in the box.
Yeah.
And the other, I mean, people need to go and look at this, because this is, for me, this is one that you will go back and look at again and again and again.
I think so.
Because every time you look at it, you get something else out of it. You go through one and you're convinced that it's nailed on. You go through another and there's so much circumstantial evidence that didn't even raise itself in the Netflix documentary.
Exactly.
I mean, he alluded to the blue Ford Fiesta with the red reg plates. Yes. That was seen tearing off away from the scene around the time.
The guards.
And it wasn't even mentioned. And, you know, and then all the other stuff. I mean, if we want to really put the tinfoil hat stuff on, the talk that she had gone to visit a ruin or a castle or something like that, and apparently she seen the White Lady, and the aunt, of course, told her not to go over because, you know, she got a really bad feeling about it, or a premonition about her passing or something like that. You know, all those kind of weird little things that came out, you know what I mean? Just little nuances that keep you intrigued, like you go, Jesus Christ, no. Like, how could a crime like this happen? No DNA. No DNA found anywhere. You know what I mean? It just physically could not happen. And I thought Jules, his partner, she seems distraught about it because it has really aged her or something terribly dealing with this.
She's been destroyed. And I felt very sorry for her in that sense too. She's been destroyed. But look, we're going to wrap it up. Ian is, we've got to go. It is Euro 2020, the day that we are recording. So we hope all of you English fans are happy, but not happy later.
But definitely check out these documentaries. Check them out and let us know what you think. And if you want to come on and discuss them further, we'd love to have a chat with viewers out there about these. So it's intriguing. We're definitely
going to do that. We're going to reach out to some people and come back and revisit this in a more broad show. And I think the best way to do it would be in a panel environment and maybe have 2 or 3 different people with different narratives and stuff, and maybe have a little debate about it. Not even a debate, just a discussion about it. So
this could kick off a nice little crime section on the Dynamos, where we could look at a lot of this stuff.
Always evolving. Just like Dustin the Diamond Poirier. You know, so let's wrap it up there now, and we'll call it a day. And until next week, this has been Dynamos Dozen. I've been your host, Niall Hogan. Thank you once again.
Pleasure, and
we'll catch you next week.
Brilliant. Chat to you soon, my man.